Hi everyone, thank you for joining us again today. My name is Anya Siddiqui and joining me today is
Shelly Bond.
Thanks for joining us today for our first webinar of this week. And today, this is a special webinar, and I just want to thank everybody for writing into us, asking us questions. So today we'll be talking about interviews, and thank you again for asking us anything that you want to know about interviews. So again, a little bit about myself. My name is Sonia Siddiqui, and I've been working with online services recently and bringing you these amazing webinars. And then again, here's Shelly
I'm
Fong.
Shelly Fong, and again, I'm also part of online services, so we work together to bring you all types of events that are virtual to help you with your job search.
So just before we get started, I just want to let you know that today we're talking about interviews, and we're going to be covering typical interview questions, interview techniques, illegal questions, and interview etiquette, and we will be answering additional questions that you might have in the end as well. So starting off, we're going to be talking about how to answer these 5 commonly asked interview questions. And to start off, we're going to be talking about when you are asked, so why do you want this job? And it's a very awkward question because, you're like, obviously for the money, but that's not the best way to answer. So when you prepare for an interview, make sure that you do your research about the company. You really have to think about it and ask yourself why you really want this job. It has to be more than just the money. I've heard people answer this question with the fact that they just want the money, and like this is a valid reason for needing a job, but it's not necessarily what a recruiter or an employer wants to hear. So to answer this question, you want to think about how your goals will align with the company and what you can offer them. You want to talk about why you were interested in the company in the first place. This is where you do your research about the company. And is this the role itself that interested you, or is it the company's mission and value statement, or is it something that they accomplished recently, or if the company is reputable? So what is it really that will align your job with this company? So for example, you have a pharmaceutical educational background and you've been in sales, and now you want to work in pharmaceutical sales. So, that's when you can talk about, well, I don't really have, I've never done pharmaceutical sales before, but because I have the background in pharma and I've been doing sales for over 5 years. I have really great relationships with doctors in the area, hospitals in the area. I think that I would be the perfect candidate for this job, and this is something I'm passionate about. So it's all about building, who you are and how you will best align with the job.
Awesome. So the next question we have is, what is your greatest strength? Which is a really, really common interview question that you're going to get asked. And at this point, you obviously don't want to tell them about how you're a wonderful skier and that's your greatest strength, unless you are applying for a ski instructor job. So what you want to do is when employers ask this question, they're really looking to see if your skills match the needs of the company and the job that you've applied for. So this is your opportunity to demonstrate that you are a good fit for the job and can speak about your abilities with confidence. So when you choose your greatest strength, you want to make sure you can relate it to the main components of the job that you are applying for. So it wouldn't be strategic to use something that is one of your greatest strengths, but not directly related to the job. So for a good example of answering the greatest strength, you might want to say, my greatest strength would be my ability to communicate well with others. This has been really important for me in my past experience as a sales representative. Being able to communicate well includes reading body language, tone of voice, and actively listening to understand the needs of the customer. My ability to do this well has led me to bring in over 20 plus new clients over a 6-month period. So that would be an example of using one of your greatest strengths to align with a potential opportunity.
Thank you. Right, so moving on to the top question now, what is your weakness? when answering this question, it's really important to find ways to remain positive. And just because it's a weakness, it doesn't mean it has to be something negative. And a lot of times I get asked people, how many weaknesses should I mention? You probably just want to stick to one, and you don't want to talk about too many because that could probably prevent you from getting the job. But you probably want to have different weaknesses written out for you so you know which one to use for each job that you apply to. You can't just always carry one weakness. It kind of has to align with the job in a way that it does not affect the job. So you can talk about non-essential skills toward the job that you're currently working on. You can mention a skill that you have been working on improving. This can be something truthful, but make sure it's not something entirely essential to the job and something that you are actively working on improving. So, and also, you don't want to say, oh, my biggest weakness is that I'm always on time. Sometimes I come too early. You don't want to say that. You don't want to say that for example, like I'm too organized or too punctual.
I work too hard.
Yeah, you don't want to see these things because these are Google's interview answers. So you don't want to say something like that. So be a little more realistic. You can say something like, I've been in management and away from my IT for a while. So there's a few courses that I'm still taking so I can get back on track to different IT technologies or whatever's coming up. You can talk. So for example, if your role does not require you to talk to a big group of people, you can say something like, well, presenting in front of large groups was a little bit of, an issue for me earlier, but I've been going to Toastmasters, or I've been, really working out of my shell now to get it out there. Depends really on, you can't be an accountant and say, well, I don't really like using Excel and I'm working on it. So it really has to be something that doesn't really relate to your job directly, but it also has to be truthful and honest.
Mm-hmm. So the next commonly asked question is, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Well, when you answer this question, you always want to make sure that you're strategic about it. Of course, you probably do want to be in a better position, you want to be CEO, you want to be your own boss, but you want to make sure whatever you answer doesn't deter you from getting the job. But you can still tell them what they want to know and be honest at the same time. So think realistically about your career and your professional goals for the future. So an example might be, I'm really excited for this opportunity to work at ABC Financial because I want to continue to make a meaningful difference in clients' lives as an advisor. ABC Financial is a leader in the industry, and I would really want to assist the company with moving forward. And eventually, I see myself as an expert in the industry, taking on more managerial tasks and potentially taking on lead on projects. So when you answer this, what you're doing is not necessarily kind of going over and above what your actual the person interviewing, for example. You don't want to say something that will threaten them or scare them or make them feel like, oh, like, who is this person? They're going to take my job. You want to be realistic and answer it based on what your career and professional goals are without kind of taking it away from the company. So that's how you can be strategic in answering where do you see yourself in 5 years.
The next question is, why should we hire you? And this is a lot like the first question that we talked about, like, why do you want this job? And this question proves why it is always important to research the company and the job description of the role that you're applying for. I know that when you're constantly applying for jobs, you would probably are applying to different companies, different roles, and you might lose track. So it's very important to make sure that you have a resume for each job and company that you applied for, and it's saved on your computer somewhere, and it's easily accessible, and that when you do get that email or that interview phone call, that you research that company in and out, just like it's a research for an actual job that you're doing. So By understanding the content and nature of the job, it will help you market your abilities and skills based on what they are looking for. This is when you get the opportunity to reiterate your skills and experience using concrete examples. So mention those major skills related to the job that you will be doing. So as I mentioned earlier, if you've got sales background and you also have an education in science or pharma, you can combine the two and say how you would be a great asset to the company.
So the last question for commonly asked questions is, do you have any questions for me? Any interview you go to, at the end of the interview, usually they'll be asking you if you have any questions. And it's always good to have 3 to 5 questions prepared so that you show that you're interested in learning about the company. So you would avoid things like asking too many questions, complicated or multi-part questions, asking about salary and benefits. That might be something you want to reserve for later to see if you have an opportunity for a second interview or if you are going to be offered the job. You don't want to ask anything that is something you can answer yourself or topics that are unrelated to the job or company. Some good questions might be, can you share more about the day-to-day responsibilities? Do you have any hesitations about my ability to do the job? This is a really brave question to ask. So if you do ask this question, you want to make sure you're prepared to have a rebuttal. So if they do say, oh, well, we're not sure you have as much experience as we're looking for, you want to be prepared to say, I do not have years of experience, but I have experiences and accomplishments that I can prove to you, and kind of go on and so forth, and be able to kind of prove yourself at that point. So if I were hired for this role, what would you want me to achieve or in my first month? So these are questions that show that you're interested in the company and that you want to see how you can fit in.
So, answering behavioral questions, interview questions using the STAR technique is very, very important. Many hiring managers or HR representatives use behavior interview questions that are designed to receive the STAR technique in responses, and we're going to go over that with you. It's really important to, you can tell a story. When you're answering interview questions, you basically have to tell them a story about something that you did in your workplace and how it reflects how it might reflect your future behavior in the new job. So it's really important to make sure that you categorize everything in a way that it's easy to tell the story and it's easier for the interviewer to follow you as well. So what is a behavioral interview question? These are questions that ask about your specific skills or experience that you've executed in the past. This is because employers believe that past behavior is the best predictor of future behavior. As much as some people might disagree with it, this is the approach that employers use. Following this format allows you to gather all the relevant information about a specific capability that the job requires. When you answer interview questions, you want to have stories prepared, and stories are generally organized in a certain manner. This can help you structure your interview answers and allow you to be more prepared during the interview.
So what does the STAR technique stand for? So the S stands for situation. So this is where you want to describe the who, what, where, when, why of the situation. What company were you working for? What was the project? Who was involved? This is where you lay the context out so that your employer or the future employer knows what exactly you're talking about versus kind of just jumping into the middle of a story. Setting up the situation will help you organize not only your own thoughts, but the story itself so that it's clear for the interviewer listening to it. Next, you want to talk about the task. This is where you describe your role in the situation. What happened? What was the task or problem that arose? And then for the next is action. So what were the actions that you took personally to solve the issue or accomplish the goal? A lot of people might get confused, and sometimes, if it was a group work, you might kind of say, oh, we did this, we did that, but this is really your time to show how you were the star. You were the person who accomplished this goal. This is what you did to get the result. And then lastly, of course, is the result itself. What was the outcome? How did you do? What happened when you took the actions to resolve the issue? So this is where you want to stay positive, and make sure that you are focusing on your accomplishments and what you did and what you learned from the experience. So the next question we have is, what are illegal questions, and what do I do if I get asked one? So when at an interview, there are certain questions that hiring managers or HR should not be asking you. Sometimes not all employers get this type of education or know about it. So at this point, you really want to prepare yourself if you do get asked any of these questions. So the Ontario Human Rights Code does protect a list of number of prohibited grounds of discrimination that include all of the lists on the screen that you see. So that can be anything from race, color, ethnic origin, sex, age, marital status, so all of these things. And they might be questions that the interviewer will ask that might be something like, oh, how old are you? How old are your children? What arrangements are you able to make for childcare while you work? What does your partner do? What race are you? Technically speaking, these are all illegal questions, and the employer shouldn't be asking you these because it really shouldn't have any relevance to the job or your capabilities of actually being able to do the job. So when asking these questions, you really are put in an awkward position. On the one hand, you really want this job. On the other hand, it doesn't feel right for them to ask you this question. So Sonia, can you tell our viewers maybe what they can do?
Yeah, so there's different things that you can do, and unfortunately, sometimes they could just be asking in conversation. Maybe they're just trying to make small talk before the interview. So there's different ways how you can tackle these questions. So firstly, you can maybe just choose not to answer. You can be straight up and say, I prefer not to answer that question as it plays no role in my ability to do the job, and move to the next one. But you know how that would sound like as well. Or you can just tell the truth, answer honestly, but express that it generally has no impact whatsoever on whether or not you would be able to do the job or not. Or you can just simply, change the subject. For example, if they ask your race or where you're from, you can mention that, you have many years of international experience, and how you can bring that to the company. So it's all about framing your answer and how you really answer the question. And then it depends on how offensive or how important that question might be to you or the job. You can choose whichever option works for you best.
So what are references and how do I get them if I'm new in Canada? So references are individuals in your professional and educational network that can speak to your skills, your abilities, and your experiences. So when asked for references, employers are typically looking for work or academic, but may also accept character references. So what are these different references? So first, your work references are from your managers, your supervisors, your colleagues, and your clients. So anybody that you work with, those might be references that you can ask. You might also have academic references, so these would include your instructors, teachers, and classmates. And then lastly, character references can be people outside of work or school that can talk about your character, personality, and abilities. So for the most part, we do see employers wanting work references, and usually from a direct supervisor or manager versus your colleagues or clients. However, depending on the position you are applying for, they might kind of want a 360 feedback in terms of people that have worked with you, people that you worked under, and the people that you kind of oversaw. So depending on what position, these are the different types of references that they might ask for. If you don't have any work references, you might kind of look to academic. So if you are in school, if you were part of a program recently, once you've come to Canada, maybe one of our bridging programs, you might be able to ask some of your classmates, or even the teacher that taught you during that time. And then lastly is character references again. We don't often see employers wanting this too much, but if you really are kind of strapped and you have nobody else to ask, you might kind of consider a character reference, depending on if the employer is comfortable with that. So first and foremost, employers ask for references to confirm your employment at an organization. So really what they want to do is validate the amount of time that you've been working there and just kind of confirm that. So at this stage, it is good news because the employer is interested in hiring you, but they just want to make sure and hear from your previous supervisors or colleagues what it was like working with you, what your strengths and weaknesses are, what your work ethic is like, and overall if you fit within the new work environment.
So when you start your job search, you want to start thinking about who can be a reference for you. So typically employers prefer to have local references to call. So if you have recently moved to Canada or you will be soon, you want to make sure that you start thinking about how you can get these local references. A great way to start is if you volunteer with an organization in Canada or join a club or a group where you're working in a team. You want to make sure that the list of references you give are people that you can trust, and trust will say positive things about you to your potential future employer. It's always a good idea to prep them before or prepare them beforehand and give them a heads up when you hand in their name. This way they can be prepared for the day off. So it's always really important to make sure that you have asked the person that you want to be referenced. So you can't just assume that your manager that you're currently working with will automatically just be your reference. You have to have a conversation with them and let them know, so if there is in the future there's potential for you to get a new job, that if they don't mind being your reference, and whenever you know that they will be calling these people as references, you need to make sure that you let them know in advance. So for example, if I'm a reference for somebody and I have no idea, and I get this call saying, oh, Shelly had applied to a position with our company, and she said that you would be her reference, can we ask you a few questions? And I would have no idea what to say. I don't even know Shelly was looking for work. So you don't want to surprise your reference. You just want to let them know a day or two in advance that somebody may be calling you, and I've given your name as a reference because we talked about it earlier.
So lastly, how do I follow up after an interview? So immediately after the interview, you want to make sure that you thank the interviewer for their time, and the fact that they, saw you that day, and that you were glad that they had that conversation with you. Another thing you want to make sure you do is ask for a business card. So if there is a panel of interviewers, make sure you try to get a business card from each person. This is really important because this is how you can follow up. What we normally say is that within 24 hours of an interview, you want to send a thank you note or email. Depending on the type of employer and the industry that you're in, I would say sometimes maybe depending on the type of organization, if it's more nonprofit, you might kind of consider maybe writing a handwritten note. Sometimes they appreciate that. If it's a more corporate environment, it's kind of quick, they're going to be making a decision quickly, then an email might be kind of the way to go. So you do want to make sure you send a thank you note to each of the interviewers that interviewed you, and this is the opportunity for you to kind of reiterate your skills and experiences. Or if you weren't able to answer a question properly, this is where you can kind of follow up and say, during the interview, I hesitated in answering this, but I realized and I've given it some thought, and I believe that these are my strengths and my abilities, and I can overcome this in this way or that way. So basically, depending on kind of what happened during the interview, this is where you can follow up with the details and really kind of show that you are interested and dedicated and you want this job. And make sure you don't follow up too soon or too late. Don't wait till the next day and say, "Oh, did I get the job? Did you guys hire someone already?" Make sure another question you ask before the interview ends is, what are the next steps in the process, right? If you ask a question like this, usually the employer will say, we're interviewing for another week or so. We still have a couple more people to see. We should get in touch to you by, so and so date. And then at least at that point, you kind of have a stronger idea of when it might be appropriate for you to follow up.
Thank you, Shelly. And yeah, and I feel like, interview follow-ups are a great way to, like Shelly said, showcase your skills that you might not have mentioned. Maybe there's something you thought about when you left the interview and you're like, oh, darn it, why didn't I say that? This is a great chance to, say that in the follow-up email after. So that brings us to the end of our webinar. I'd like to thank everybody for watching. We are going to move to our Q&A period now. So if you have any questions, you can type them into the questions tab. I see that people have already started asking questions. So I'll give you a few minutes to start typing in your questions over there. Okay, so yeah, so everyone, you will get a recording of the webinar after it ends. This will be recorded, and if you have friends who were not able to attend, you can simply forward them the link and they should be able to watch it as well. All right, so Samuel has a question and wants to know, is the STAR technique standard for Canadian interviews? Yes, it is pretty standard. Employers are aware that you will be using that method, and if you don't, they're going to wonder, did you even practice interviewing? Did you even research how an interview is done? So yes, I highly recommend using the STAR approach for sure.
In my experience, even working as a recruiter, we would often make our questions with the STAR technique in mind. So we would actually put, our interview question, and then we would write out STAR and kind of write the notes in where you would kind of answer that. And oftentimes, the more we saw each kind of section filled out, the more we knew that that was a thorough answer, and that this person has really kind of done their research and covered all areas to answer that question for us. So definitely make sure you're following the STAR technique.
Thank you for the question, Samuel. Sana is asking, is it okay if in an interview to tell that my English is not too strong? See, that might come up as a weakness, right? And you don't want the interviewer to focus or hone in into your weakness. So you don't need to bring it up. I mean, if they feel like, your communication skills or your English is not your first language, it's not a big deal. Welcome to Canada. That's the thing about Canada. Yep. English is pretty much not anybody's first language. So you're in the right place. As long as you can communicate professionally, you're able to tell them your stories or, tell them about your experience. It should not be an issue at all. I mean, we've got employers whose, English is their second language, and, they come in and speak to you in our webinars as well. So it should not be a big issue at all, and I don't think you need to mention it before the interview or anything. All right, so the next question is, how to answer the question, why did you leave your last job if I was fired from my last job? Okay, so, Kelly, do you want to start?
Yeah, that's definitely a tough one. I think at that point it really depends on the reason for, why you left your last job and what you were kind of fired for. Obviously, you don't want to say, oh, I was fired for ABC reason, but you might want to find ways to kind of dance around it, basically, and maybe find a reason that was genuine, that you really did want to kind of leave the job, or maybe you were, seeking a new opportunity, or that, you just kind of felt like you were looking for a different area of growth and a different area of expertise that you wanted to focus on, and that's why you kind of decided to leave that position.
And you don't want to say anything negative about your previous job or manager or coworkers. So, I mean, maybe if you weren't getting along with them or someone told on you, someone, you don't want to bring these things up. They don't want you to bring your drama with you to your new workplace. And you're asking a question saying, should I use my previous manager as a reference? If you were fired, I probably wouldn't use your previous manager. And it doesn't always have to be your previous manager that you work with as your reference. It could be someone that you worked with in your previous position before that, or it could be that if you're volunteering somewhere, or a lot of us have two jobs at one time. If you have another part-time job, you can always use them as a reference as well. All right, so next question. It would be great if you could keep your questions short, because if they're too long, we have to skip them. But Alexandra wants to know, what are the signs that an interview has gone well? Okay, do you want to start or do you want? Okay, sure. So a great sign would be is when you probably ask your follow-up question saying, so how do you think that my experience aligns with your company? Or, you can kind of ask that already in the interview, and you can tell by the way they answer that question. And even during the interview, if you feel like the conversation's flowing really well, you're smiling and they're smiling back, and, it's going well, everyone's comfortable, that usually means that, the interview went well. And we didn't really talk about interview etiquette as much, but it's really important to walk into the room with your full positive energy. You need to bring that in, because as soon as the interview recognizes that, it kind of wakes them up too. We used to do a lot of mock interviews, and I think I did about maybe 18 in one day, and I was drained just doing them. And then when the client was sitting in front of me doing the mock interview, I guess they were kind of feeding off my low energy. And when he was answering questions, I wasn't feeling it, so I had to say, you were very monotone, and you were just using one tone. And he said, well, Sonia, it's because you were doing it. So you feed off each other's energy. And the next client who walked in, he was just so full of energy, I woke right up. So it's about the energy that you bring in, and it's reciprocated. So that's how I would think that you would know how your interview went. Arjun wants to know, how do you handle Skype interviews? So
yeah, so for Skype interviews, you just want to make sure that you prepare, right? So you want to make sure that you have the right area set up, that you are kind of ready for the interview, that you make sure you come prepared and on time. You even kind of things like the background. You want to make sure when you do a Skype interview that you're not kind of sitting at a coffee shop and it's kind of loud and there's other people talking and there's babies crying and there's so much going on. You want to make sure you find yourself in a quiet room, kind of like we have a webinar room here where we do our webinars. So we want to make sure that there's not a lot of kind of external noise, that there's nothing distracting in your background, that you're dressed appropriately. Don't just kind of show up in your pajamas, and make sure that you are visually kind of ready, and your appearance is kind of good as well.
Yes, that's correct. It will be just like an in-person interview. So all the rules that apply to an in-person interview would apply to a Skype interview. You would dress exactly the same. So if you're supposed to be wearing a suit and tie to go to this interview, you would do the same thing. Make sure you're wearing pants, because I know they're not going to be able to see you, but you never know. Well, you might have to get up to fix something or turn the light on, or I don't know what it would be, and you really don't want it's happened before to a client. He didn't get the job, so I hope he's not watching this. But it's happened before, so you just want to make sure that you're dressed professionally. And the only thing that is a little different here is obviously you're in your home, but eye contact is very, very important. So you want to make sure that you're looking directly into the camera and not at the screen, so that you can have the illusion of making eye contact with the speaker.
Yeah, so all of the rules apply, even your body language. You want to make
Same
sure,
thing.
how far are you from the camera? How close are you? You want to make sure that you're in an appropriate distance where they can kind of see your frame and kind of go from there.
Exactly. Thank you. So Carmen has a question, wants to know how often should follow-ups be after an interview? Would it be appropriate after 1 week? Like as Shelly mentioned before, if you ask them what the next steps are, they would typically tell you, well, we'll have another round of interviews, and then in 2 weeks we should be getting back to you. So wait until 2 weeks, and if you don't hear back from them, maybe you can start following up with them after that. If they say 1 week, I mean, that's how you should take it. You really need to respect their time as well. You want to make sure that you don't do it before the 2 weeks or the 1 week that they've mentioned. Justina has a question. Can you say that your lack of Canadian workplace culture is a weakness?
I wouldn't necessarily start it out in that way. I wouldn't say that your lack of Canadian workplace culture is a weakness, but you can talk about the journey that you kind of had to come to Canada, and the fact that you're improving and you're finding experiences and things that you can do to kind of get used to the Canadian environment, because a lot of the time it's really just about knowing how to work with others. And so if you have that experience from other positions that you've worked back home, I wouldn't necessarily try to draw attention to the fact that you're from somewhere else, or that you don't have that Canadian experience. You want to kind of show that you fit in right away, and not actually bring attention to the fact that you haven't been in Canada and you don't know these things, because these are things that you should be doing on your own in terms of understanding Canadian culture. So watching the news and like doing volunteering and working in the Canadian workplace. So getting that experience is what you're going to want to continue to do. So I wouldn't necessarily draw attention to the fact that you don't necessarily have it, because you do. You just have to find ways of showing it in a different way.
And oftentimes you notice that employers use that excuse sometimes, saying you don't have the training experience, even though I mean they're really not allowed to say that anymore. But that's just a way of saying that we already had a candidate for this job and they don't want to tell you that. So don't take it to heart thinking that's your weakness, because it really isn't. If you've been to a few job interviews, you already have more Canadian experience than anyone else. So don't take that personally when someone says that to you. Just keep on going. Melissa has a question. Wants to know, can I say that can I tell that my weakness by speaking English is not my first language? Again, we mentioned that you really don't need to focus in on that, because it's all about your communication skills. If you're able to communicate, and I know that you'll probably be very nervous in an interview, and that really, even for a fluent English speaker, they would probably forget a lot of words too. So it happens to us all the time during these events, but I wouldn't focus in on that at all. So again, you don't need to mention that at all. Manhard's asking, when asked for business card, what if one of the interviewers say, well, you'll have our contact after? It's fine. It's very easy to reach people these days. You can, even if it's a celebrity, you can easily follow them on Instagram or Twitter. So you have LinkedIn, you know their names, you can go find them on LinkedIn and reach out to them there. You probably got an email from the HR or one of the hiring managers. You can always email them, and then in the body of the email you can ask them, well, I just wanted to thank so and so as well. Would I be able to get their email or contact information as well? So there's always ways to reach out to them anyway.
Yeah, if you forget even or something like that, there are lots and lots of ways. Even doing a little bit of digging, like searching their name in Google, you might see that the company that they're associated with, maybe even going on the website, sometimes they list the names there. So it's really just about being able to do a little digging to kind of show that extra effort, and that you went the extra mile to kind of thank them for their time, and just show that you're genuinely interested in the position.
Awesome. Mustafa has a question, wants to know, is it likely to obtain a call for an interview abroad, as in outside of Canada, or do employers prefer to have interviews locally? So we have a pre-arrival services program, and in that program we have employment consultants and we have employer liaisons who are the job developers who are constantly working on looking for employers who are willing to hire people before they even come to Canada. So, I mean, we've had these conversations, we've had these Skype interviews set up for our pre-arrival clients as well, but ideally, yeah, probably they probably want to make sure that the person is in Canada, because let's say if they need you to be in the office for some reason within a week, you probably won't be the best candidate. So that's why we always recommend you're doing this very close to your so you're applying for jobs very close to your arrival time in Canada. So by the time you're here, you know, you're able to attend these interviews and whatnot. But you also have to make sure that you give yourself a few weeks time to settle in Canada. It does take a very long time. Even if you go on vacation, it takes a few days just to settle in before you can really start going out there and, you know, taking a vacation. So there's so many things in settlement. You need to look for housing. You need to look for if you have kids. You want to make sure that they're in the right school. Buying things for the house. I mean, you're going to buy like everything from like beds, a coffee machine, a toaster, microwave. There's so many little things that you have to do. So, and it will occupy a lot of your time. Applying for health cards, you know, going to different ministries. It will take up a lot of your time. So think about, you know, giving yourself that time before you put yourself into the job market again.
Yeah, totally.
Um, Vanessa wants to know, what is your recommendation to overcome the anxiety and nervousness before and during an interview? Very good question, Vanessa.
And just know that kind of everybody, for the most part, has this experience. And even when I go to interviews, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so nervous, I'm sweating, what's going on, what's going to happen? So what you can do is make sure you take deep breaths. I think that's always something that you want to be doing, and you want to make sure that it's to help kind of calm yourself. Another thing is even your body language. So just kind of being aware of your body language, making sure, you know, that day you're standing a little bit taller and you're kind of giving yourself that positive feeling and giving yourself those positive affirmations. They actually even have, you know, videos on YouTube with positive affirmations, you know, even before an interview specific to that reason. So if that's something that might help you, you might want to kind of listen to it the day before or even the morning of your interview and just kind of hear those positive thoughts. The other things that you can do is maybe focus on kind of the accomplishments that you have, because that always helps you feel kind of more positive and feel kind of just with higher confidence, because that's what you really want to show during the interview. So make sure you're just sending yourself positive energy, you're kind of being around positive people, and just kind of make sure that you prepare yourself with kind of positivity.
And YouTube and Google is your best friend when it comes to these things. You'll be surprised how specific the videos are on there. Like she said, how to prepare yourself for an interview, 10 minutes before an interview, whatever it is. Little tips here and there. If you're a smoker, maybe don't smoke before you get into the interview, because, I mean, it's 2018. we shouldn't be really smoking, but a lot of people are sensitive to, you know, the cigarette smoke and the smell of it. You don't want to smell like that when you walk into an interview. A lot of times coffee might make you extra jittery, so if you're having 2 cups of coffee that day, maybe cut down and have just one. And, you know, just tell yourself that if this is it, you're going to get the job, but also tell yourself, if you don't get the job, it's fine, there's going to be another one, right? So be positive in a way that you're telling yourself, yes, I'm going to do this, I'm ready for this, but if I don't get it, I don't get it, but I will give my all, I will do my best, okay?
Exactly.
So, and it's really okay. There's so many more there's tons of jobs. Chandra wants to know if there's mentor service available with ACCESS Employment. Certainly, there's a lot of mentoring services available that you can take advantage of if you're in the GTA. So all you have to do is come to one of our locations, and you can sign up for speed mentoring events that are exclusive only to ACCESS clients, or you can go through TMP Triac, the Mentoring Partnership, and you can find out more about it if you come into the office, or you can email us at onlineservices services at accessemployment.ca, and I can direct you to the right person as well. Jeffrey wants to know if the interview terminates within 10 minutes, does that mean they are not interested in me? Very good question.
Yeah, I mean, that would depend. If it was maybe like a phone interview, phone
Right.
screening, generally those are shorter in time. They might just kind of ask a couple quick questions just to see if there's someone that they want to interview. If you went in for a 10-minute interview, I'm assuming they maybe didn't ask you that many questions, or they just didn't have too many questions to ask. I haven't really kind of heard that.
Exactly. Or, I mean, yes, maybe they did have someone already in mind. Mind everyone, I just want to make this clear. We spoke about it in our previous webinar, I think, letting you know that how companies hire. They want to hire from within. And, that's the first few, I think, 2 weeks, the job posting has gone out internally. And if they don't hear back, that's when they start reaching out and they have to post the job. But just in case someone was on vacation and they come back like, hey, sorry, I was going to apply for the job. And then, the manager would be, yes, you're perfect for the job, but we've already posted it externally, so we are going to still have to, interview these people. But, I don't think that they would really bring you in if they're really sure if they have someone. They could just do a few phone interviews, but they might, call you in just in case, but then they still have someone else in mind, which is fine. I mean, it's totally okay because there's another job waiting for you.
And if it's a 10-minute interview, I would kind of see that more for maybe like if you're at a job fair, and there's a lot of people, then like a 10-minute interview, I would say that makes sense. I wouldn't necessarily kind of see that it's very common for someone to bring them in for a lengthy interview and then it only goes 10 minutes, because even answering one question or two questions ends up taking that time. So I think it just kind of depends.
And then you're asking, the next question is, if you're more qualified in the interview, does that mean you are automatically a reject? No, there's that, I don't think so at all. If anything, they're probably called you in because you have the skills and experience that they don't have, and they're seeking them. So they really do need. So, for example, if I am in advertisement and I don't really have any digital experience, so I'm looking for someone with a digital background who can do the job that I can't do or my team can't do currently. So I don't think that has anything to do with being overqualified and being rejected. Not at all. All right, so our next question. Sorry, okay, so that's another question. What material do you need to have with you for a phone interview? Oh, great question. Yeah. So do you want to answer that question?
Yeah, so for a phone interview, again, it's kind of similar to that Skype question. You want to make sure that if it is a timed phone interview, you are in a space where you can talk clearly, where you feel like you're comfortable, and where you're kind of ready to have the conversation. So normally if you're doing a phone interview, you might want to kind of just have your resume in front of you. Generally, they ask more kind of questions that are more screening generally when it's a phone interview before they're bringing you in. So they might kind of ask you those typical questions that we talked about today. So just make sure you practice those 6 commonly asked interview questions that we shared earlier. And just kind of prepare yourself with your resume, kind of go over it. At this point, I don't necessarily think you need your references or anything like that, but just kind of know your skills and your experiences and what your capabilities are. Again, practicing those 5 commonly asked questions might kind of help you with preparing yourself for that phone interview.
And it would be best to keep your resume that you used to apply for that particular job in front of you, because you might have changed a few things on your resume, and they might ask you something directly, and it's like a cheat sheet in front of you because it's an interview, but you get to still look at your resume. It's like an open book test, so you still get to look at it, so you can focus on those skills again and basically advertise those skills again to the phone interviewer. And like Shelly said, make sure that you're in a quiet space, and I wouldn't answer this phone interview wearing pajamas again, only because when you come home from work and you're changing into your pajamas, your energy is just like dropping down and you're so relaxed. You don't want to be super relaxed for an interview. You want to make sure that your voice is nice and crisp, and it still seems professional. You know, you're not on your couch just sitting there and your TV's on. Yeah, you're not doing that.
Yeah.
I even recommend wearing shoes sometimes because when you wear your shoes, it means you're ready to go out there and get things done, right? So it just totally elevates your energy in a different way. So
and make sure you smile as well.
Yeah.
If you're on the phone call, make sure you smile. It makes a difference when you're speaking on the phone, because even though it's through the phone, people can hear your energy. So if you're smiling, they can hear that smile in your voice, that enthusiasm.
Yeah.
So make sure you are smiling during the phone conversation as well.
Perfect, thank you. So Mustafa had a question. He wants to know, is it okay to talk about my family during an interview, or should I just keep it professional?
I think we can go ahead and say that it'd be best for you to keep it professional. Again, like we mentioned earlier, that there are actually illegal questions. So if they're asking you questions about your family, do you have children? What does your, your wife or husband or whoever do? These are technically things that they should not be asking you. So if you're kind of just bringing it up for them to know, it's kind of reason for them to kind of discriminate against you. If, for example, they were looking for someone who kind of could give them all their time and didn't have other responsibilities kind of to take care of, so you don't want to kind of say anything to prevent them from wanting to hire you, right? So I would make sure you keep it professional, keep it kind of strictly to what your skills and your abilities are and what you're capable of offering the company. So keep it professional.
Thank you, Shelly. I 100% agree. I mean, other than the only way I could think of is if you're talking about the connections that you have, the network that you have, that you can maybe say, well, I've got a lot of family who are also in recruitment, and so we go to a lot of events together. So, if that's what you want to say, they keep it professional, but I wouldn't bring up family otherwise at all. Sena has a question, wants to know, what if an interviewer asks you if you're interviewing with other employers as well? What should you say to that? I would really think it depends. So if you are a newcomer and you're actively looking, so you can say, yes, I've interviewed at a few other places as well, but I wanted to make sure that I was fully prepared to be here today because this is exactly where I want to work. I can't believe I got a call from here because I've been researching this company for, whatever, how many years, and my goal was to be here, because you really do want to show them that you are looking for work, but at the same time, like, this is the place that you really, really want to be at. If you're already working, and you're looking for a job just on the side, then it might be like you're just shopping around or something like that. So you really have to say, well, no, not really. I actually saw this job posting and I thought that this really matches well with my profile and my passion and what I really like doing. So that's why I applied here. So be careful how you answer it. You don't want to say something like, oh yes, I've been getting tons of job offers, everywhere. We actually had a client that I think he applied to Dell and a few other companies, and when he was asked, are you getting other interviews? And he said, yeah, I have a few offers waiting for me, and they actually didn't consider him. So you don't want to show off in a way, but I mean, it depends on your situation, right? If you're a newcomer, then obviously you're going out there doing interviews, but you really want to focus in on how lucky you are to be here for this interview, and you really want to, this is where you want to be. All right, so next question is, what is the best time to select to be interviewed, morning or afternoon? Okay, good question.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you don't necessarily get the opportunity to choose, so you just have to be ready and confident and prepared no matter what. If you are lucky enough to get to choose, I think it really depends on the person. For me, I personally prefer in the morning. Number one, I want to just get it over with. And number two, I know that, the interviewers probably, came in, had their morning coffee, and then they're kind of just starting their their end of interview. So then they are kind of more energized and prepared. On the other hand, you can say that, if you go at the end, you want to be the last kind of thing or the last interview that they have, in which case you kind of stay relevant in their mind. I think if you are prepared and you're really qualified for the position and you really know how to sell your skills and market your abilities, it shouldn't matter, because that should be able to that you should be able to showcase that you're a good fit for the company regardless of what time it is in the morning. So I would kind of generally go with what you feel more comfortable with and where kind of what it fits better into your day and how you will feel most prepared for that interview.
Perfect. That's the perfect answer. Thank you. Vanessa wants to know what is appropriate to do with your hands while in an interview. I'm Latin and I use my hands a lot. I was just thinking, we do that as well. You don't want to do this in an interview, but it's okay to use your hands in an interview. Just keep it at table level. You also don't want to be too nervous and just grab onto your hands and you're just clasping them like this under the table. You don't want to do that either. Be comfortable with yourself. You don't want to make any aggressive hand gestures. So it's totally okay to use your hands. Just make sure that they're kind of at table level and you're not, don't do that. But other than that, I think it should be okay. Liliana has a question. How should I reply to a rejection email from the recruiter or hiring manager? They usually don't give any feedback when you're not selected. That is true. They really don't have to, and they really don't have the time to do it. So
it doesn't hurt to ask though. So if they do kind of get back to you and say, we've already kind of filled this role, you can always email back and keep that connection going, right? Well, thank you so much for interviewing me. It was a really great experience, and I'm grateful to have had the opportunity to meet you. And then here you can kind of ask, I am kind of continuing to look. This is an area that I want to continue to grow in, and I do hope to be considered for future opportunities. Is there any feedback you can share with me regarding the interview? Or any experiences that I might kind of need to improve on in order to be selected as the next candidate, right? So if you say something like that, it gives them the opportunity to see how kind of professional you are, first of all, the fact that you are willing to improve, and then it also gives you the opportunity to keep in contact, right? If they do reply, then wonderful. Chances are they might, but at least you put it out there that you wanted to kind of keep that connection, and who knows what might happen in the future.
Thank you. We're going to do one last question. I know you've got tons of great questions, and I wish we could go over all of them, but we're running out of time. But Samuel wants to know, how do employers evaluate my qualifications if obtained outside of Canada? So you really have to get your credentials, your education assessed by services such as World Education Services, WES. You can Google them, and you will have to send in your transcripts and get the whole process done over there. So there's other places as well, but if Shelly wants to add.
I think you pretty much did it.
All right. So, make sure that you do that, because employers will need to have proof of education, and your university transcripts from your home country will not do it. They have to be assessed through organizations such as World Education Services. So thank you everyone for joining us. That does bring us towards the end of our webinar. But before you go, I know that you had a lot of questions, but I hope that our ACCES for page will be able to help answer your questions. So if you go to our website, which is accessemployment.ca, you can click on ACCES. So if you're on your computer, it'll show up like this. If you're on your cell phone, you will have to go all the way down to, and I don't know why we're in the end, if that was the best page over there. But you can check out different tiles where it's, basically, if you want to know more interviews, you can click on this, and it'll take you to past webinars on interviews. There's more videos, there's articles, different tips and tricks for interviews. So make sure you check that out as well. Our next webinar is next week, Monday, July 23rd, and it is by RBC. And this one's a little different because this is focused on RBC IT, technology teams, and we're really excited to have them on as well. So you can go to the same way you registered for our webinar, you can go back to the page and register for this one as well. And for pre-arrival services, Shelly, did you want to talk about this one?
Yeah, so it's online job support and networking opportunities before you land in Canada. So there are kind of specific industries that they do focus on. So if you are outside of Canada and you're looking to kind of move to Canada and get that experience, if you are between kind of 2 to 3 months before you're landing, this is a really great opportunity for you to get connected to Canada, get connected to potential opportunities to speak with employers before you actually land. So I know a lot of people ask this question, they want to kind of get that experience before they land. This is a really great opportunity for you to do so. So to learn more, you can email cec@accessemployment.ca or visit our website, which is posted on the screen.
And please note that we do have a very high volume of questions coming in or requests coming in, so it might take a few days for them to get back to you. And please stay in touch with us. You can. We're very active on our social media, and we just recently got onto Instagram as well. So if you want to follow us on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, we have it covered. So check us out there and look out for new events. We have in-house events, online events, and webinars coming up. So thank you everyone again for joining us. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye. Have a great day or evening ahead.